Okay, I'm going to be reading chapter 6 called Corporal Nagy from the Singing Tree. Summer was gone and autumn slipped away, and with it went the hope so many men had voiced, we will be home for Christmas. Winter came, then spring, and with the melting snow more and more men went away to the ever-growing war. Old Arpad was almost the only herder left, and he didn't have very much to do because the great corrals were nearly empty. Father had to sell most of his horses to the army. He had kept only a few mares, one stallion, and horses too young to be broken in, and Jancy's herd. The 6 tiny foals were yearlings now. They roamed the pastures independent of their mothers, 6 proud, stepping, glossy-coated young horses. Jancy's great pride and joy. He couldn't spend half as much time with them as he would have liked to. There were too many other things to do. He didn't even have time to notice how many of the responsibilities of running a big ranch had come to rest on his shoulders. Father was always there, of course. The two of them were almost inseparable. But Father no longer gave orders to Jancy. He only suggested what should be done. That was all right. What Jancy resented was that his father, had taken to keeping books. Evenings after the family had gone to bed, Father would bring out a fat ledger to pore over it, his pen scratching away in the silence of the kitchen for hours. One night Jancy woke up. He felt that it must be very late, and yet there was a light seeping into his room. He slipped out of bed and padded noiselessly into the kitchen. A candle burned almost to its last drops of tallow, and it was sputtering on the table. Father had fallen asleep, his arms stretched across the open pages. Jancy rubbed his sleep-swimming eyes and glanced at the cuckoo clock on the shelf. 2 o'clock, almost morning. Father, he shook his father's shoulder crossly. You are worse than... Words failed Jancy as Father's blurred, heavy eyes looked up at him. And then, because that beloved face was so pitifully tired, he made his voice sound very gruff. We plan to start haying tomorrow, and now it's already today. And honestly, Father, he sank into a chair and jabbed an accusing thumb at the book. What did you start that for? We didn't need books before. Well, maybe I'm getting old, son. Old people like to play with new things, smiled Father, stretching his arms wide and yawning hugely. Then he flipped the book shut and leaned his elbows on it. Sometime when you just feel like improving your mind, as Brother would say, you might look into this. It doesn't bite, he chuckled as Jancy made a face. Huh, you keep it locked away. Yes, I have, but... Something clattered onto the table. But, young master, here is the key. You can lock it up yourself now. Keep the key. I won't need it for quite a while. That's good, sighed Jancy, and he locked the book in the cupboard where Father kept his gun and stood twirling the key around his finger. Throw it in the well? He grinned. I wouldn't, Father smiled back, rising from his chair. Now run back to bed. I'm going to catch a little cat nap myself. The morning was bright and clear with the shining, spotless freshness of early June mornings. Jancy was eager to be off and start the haying, and he fidgeted impatiently all through breakfast. Such a made-to-order day for work on the fields, and there was Father talking about unimportant things like vegetables and fruit, things that could just as well be discussed after the day's work was done. Jancy frowned at Lily. She had started it with some silly complaint about Maylie, the old cow's not giving enough milk. Then he shook his head, disapproving of his own cross thought about Lily. She was all right. He was glad she hadn't gone back to school. For all he heard, Budapest was no place for a girl these days, with everybody crazy about this war business, with the soldiers on leave drinking and carousing. At least that was what Judge Cormos had said before he went away to the war. And with her mother still so sick in the hospital. What did you say, Father? I wasn't listening. So I noticed, smiled Father. I was saying that we need a new cow. See Uncle Moses the next time you go to the village. He'll find us a good one. Cows, exploded Jancy with such contempt in his voice that Father began to laugh. Well, since Lily has taken that hateful job of milking off your hands, the least you can do is give her a good one to milk. Take Kate with you. Kate, he spoke to her. Uncle Moses said something about a new preservative for eggs. You'd better talk to him too and let him order some. Egg prices will go still higher. Oh, Martin, it can't last forever, sighed Mother, her voice small and tight. Not forever, said Father. They seem to have settled down to it, though. It might last quite a while. Martin, with all the men away, what will we do? I live in fear. Any day one of those dreadful yellow cards might come calling you in. Taking you away, Martin. If I see that card, I'll just die. Now, old lady, that's no way to talk. His voice sounded forcedly cheerful, almost too loud. When she didn't smile, he prodded her under the chin, lifting her bowed head. I assure you, Mother, that none of those yellow cards will come into your house. Now smile. Bowed head, sorry. You mean they won't take you? Whispered Mother, smiling through her tears. Bah, nobody can take me anywhere. I go where I want to go, or have to go, but take me? No. I will if you sit here gossiping much longer, grumbled Jancy. Father chuckled. Horses saddled? Hours ago. Well then, Father rose reluctantly, almost pulling himself erect. As he straightened up, his eyes roamed around the old kitchen, making brief little stops on the gaily painted cupboards, the fat white stove, the flower bench under the window. It was so unusual for him to linger that Mother looked at him with narrowing eyes. Martin, you are as pale as a ghost. Are you ill? Sitting up all night playing with books. Ask your son, he smiled. He laid an arm around Mother's waist, held out his other hand to the girls. Come, little monkeys, help a poor old man to the door. Ooh, Uncle Martin, but you are strong, gasped Kate when he let them go at the door. You gave us a real bear hug. You hurt. Ah, poor little kitty, come, I'll kiss you to make it well. He bent and kissed the tip of her nose and then quickly kissed Lily. You too, and you, old lady, he chuckled, giving Mother a resounding kiss. Well, I never, you big baby, you. Go on now, or Jancy will lay you across his knee. She laughed, pushing him toward the stable. After the riders had gone, she smiled down at Kate. I've never seen him so full of fun, play-acting like a big baby. And there she is with the two girls as he's walking away. It's nice, said Lily. Most everybody else is so cross and grumpy now. I wish someone would stop the war. Oh, dear, sighed Mother, her eyes troubled again. It doesn't seem possible, does it? All this beautiful sunshine, birds singing, little plants growing all around us, and out there, somewhere, men are killing each other. I'm thankful, at least, that we can't hear the guns. Daddy, said Kate in a choked voice, and Mother drew both girls close. He is safe, lamb. He is far away in Russia, but he is safe. Prisoners must be better off than we are, said Lily solemnly. I hope that Father will be taken too. They don't have to wait and worry. And when the war is over, they'll just go home. Crooned Mother. Everybody will go home. There will be singing and dancing again, and our men working in the fields. Women will go back to their kitchens to cook for them instead of plowing and reaping. Why, it isn't even seemly to see a woman behind a heavy plow. The whole world is turned upside down. It must be, she cried. With all of us mooning here instead of doing our chores, what would Jancy say? That bossy thing, smiled Kate. He thinks he owns the world the way he orders everyone around, even Uncle Martin. He is doing a man's work too, sighed Mother. I know he will be as hungry as a wolf again. Haying all day is hard work for a boy. I'll be out in a minute. But Jancy wasn't haying. He didn't know he wasn't going to until after they last had turned into the lane. There Father reined in his horse and rode slowly, looking back at the house. Son, he said as Jancy, his face at a picture of disapproval, galloped back to him. We won't start haying today. We'll ride into town. I have some things to do that cannot wait. Town? Jancy's frown melted away. Hooray! This was going to be a holiday. A trip to town always was. It happened so seldom. He didn't question this sudden change of plans, only commented, If I had known that, I would have worn my blue suit. Maybe we'll eat in one of those restaurants? Father said they would, most certainly. They would just have one big time together, a man's party. We'll eat all the ice cream we want for once. He winked at Jancy, without Mother worrying about stomach aches. Raspberry and vanilla and apricot and chocolate and orange, said Jancy. And lemon and coffee and strawberry with lots of nuts and whipped cream, Father replied. And castor oil when we get home, finished Jancy, making a wry face, but with his eyes shining. Who cares, laughed Father. They didn't stop in the village. Father seemed to be in a hurry now. He didn't look either to the left or to the right, but rode straight through, his spurs digging into Bader's sides. Then they were in the open country again, the dusty white road between village and town stretching ahead of them like a white ribbon laid on the green velvet of the fields. Soon the tall buildings and chimneys of the towns loomed up. Then the horses' hooves were clattering on the cobbled streets. They left the horses in a livery stable near the railroad station and walked into the center of the town. Jancy had been to town only 3 times in his life. The tall houses, large plate glass windows, and the bustle of many hurrying strangers were still a novelty to him. Craning his neck, gaping into store windows, he bumped into people left and right. Father took his arm. This is where we are going, he said, opening the door of a large building. Town Hall was printed on the door, and many small rooms opened off the long corridor inside. The clerk is waiting for you, Mr. Nagy, said a boy to whom Father had given his name. Then they were standing in one of the small rooms. It smelled of dust and ink so badly that Jancy sneezed. So this is the young fellow, said the old man behind the desk, peering at Jancy over his spectacles. Pretty young for what's in here, Mr. Nagy. He tapped a folded paper in front of him. Young but level-headed. He will be all right, said Father, laying a hand on Jancy's shoulder. Too bad. This war. The clerk shook his head sadly, then pushed the paper across the desk. Just sign this, both of you. Father signed his name rapidly. Write your name here, young fellow, said the clerk, pointing to a dotted line. Jancy hesitated, then shook his head resolutely. I'll read what it says first. The old clerk's mouth fell open. Well, I never. Who taught you that? Nobody. I heard it when Uncle Moses scolded Aunt Vidor. She was crying, and he said she deserved to be cheated. He said only a fool would sign a paper without reading it first. I am not a fool, he added solemnly. The clerk slapped his thigh. He'll do, Mr. Nagy, he exclaimed. Father was looking at Jancy. I'll explain, son. This paper gives you the right to buy or sell anything on the farm, animals, grain, food, whatever we need, without asking me first. You know how busy we are now. Sometimes I may not be home when the buyers come, and this will save time. A whistle escaped Jancy. You mean I can do anything you would do? Practically, smiled Father. Woo, give me that pen. He signed his name in round, sprawling letters. Wait till I tell Kate, and Mother, and Lily. Woo! He jumped up, hooking his thumbs into his vest pockets, and began to strut, grinning broadly. Well, that's that, said Father, slipping the paper into prancing Jancy's pocket. Hang on to this. Don't worry, I'll sleep with it under my pillow. Good luck to you, Mr. Nagy, and to you, young fellow, said the clerk when they were leaving. Give my regards to Uncle Moses. You know him, beamed Jancy. No, but I like to. He sounds like a good friend for a young man like you to have. He is, said Father over Jancy's vigorously assenting head. I always take his advice, and so will Jancy. Then they were out in the sunshine again among the jostling crowd. There were soldiers in uniforms everywhere, strolling or hurrying along the sidewalks, behind the windows of cafes and restaurants. Long columns of soldiers were marching on every street, and once in a while heavy artillery trucks rumbled and clattered toward the railroad station. Cannon, said Father when Jancy gaped at the unearthly-looking canvas-wrapped monsters on the trucks. They could throw a shell from here to the farm and shatter the house. Not our house. They wouldn't, exclaimed Jancy, casting a threatened glance at the cannon. No, not our house, thank the Lord, sighed Father. But they will shatter houses like ours somewhere, wherever they are going. Little peaceful white houses, in Serbia or Russia, homes of little peaceful people such as we are. He had been speaking in a low voice, and then unexpectedly he asked, Remember the roundup, Jancy, when you and Kate got caught up in the stampede? Do I? War is like a stampede, Jancy. A small thing can start it, and suddenly the very earth is shaking with fury, and people turn into wild things, crushing everything beautiful and sweet, destroying homes, lives, blindly in their mad rush from nowhere to nowhere. A stampede, a mad whirlwind that sucks in men like those marching so bravely. His eyes followed the endless column of soldiers, and spits them out when they are, like that. Two crippled men in uniform passed them on crutches, and tired eyes staring vacantly ahead. I hate it, said Jancy between clenched teeth, with all the flaming, scornful conviction of a boy who has grown up to respect life and healthy strength in plants, animals, and people. To make things live and to keep them alive had always been his life, and now he was face to face with a dark power that destroyed life and health. He couldn't understand it, and he could only hate it. Everyone hates it, his father said, but we are caught in the stampede, and we'll have to see it through. Father's smile broke through the gloom in his words had cast. How about a great big meal now, son? Make us feel better. Jancy ate sparingly of all the strange dishes, saving plenty of room for the promised ice cream. Even so, there was a limit to the capacity of his stomach. He had to give up after the orange ice. But since Father had ordered different flavors for himself, he had a taste of every kind. They leaned back, laughing at each other. I'm so heavy in the middle I can't get up from this chair, groaned Jancy. Well then, stay where you are. I have to do some things anyway. Wait here for me, son. Father asked the waiter to bring Jancy picture magazines to look at and left. Jancy was engrossed with the magazines. He had never seen any before. The pictures of the theaters, of Budapest, of foreign countries were like a fairy tale opening up for him. War pictures he paged over frowningly. He hated war, but the photograph of a familiar face arrested his eyes and he yelled out, Judge Cormos! Faces turned toward him from every table. He was on his feet, waving the magazine. Judge Cormos, look, everybody, Jancy scanned the printed lines again. He got the Iron Cross from the German Kaiser himself. Another glance. For conspicuous bravery before the enemy. But he isn't dead, he cried as the words brought back in a flash of memory that sad day when Aaron went away. No, sir, he was promoted, too. Look, he is a major. He pushed the magazine into the face of anybody who wanted to look, and his enthusiasm made everyone want to. That's great, son, said an officer, smiling. Who is he? He's a friend of mine, declared Jancy. He is the judge, Lily's father, you know. I see. And who are you, young fellow? Why... Jancy blinked, surprised at the thought that anybody should be so ignorant as to not know who he was. Jancy Nagy, of course. More questions followed, revealing the fact that all these people were sadly in need of information. Why, they didn't know anything. Then, not waiting for any more questions, he was prattling for all he was worth, words gushing out of him. The farmer, Father Kate, Lily, his herd, the dogs, Uncle Moses, all he loved came to life to these strange listeners whose numbers grew as he talked on. He didn't know that in this railroad town, whence thousands of singing men went away every day and into which hundreds of silent maimed ones were sent back, his words had created a little island of almost a forgotten place. Men and women, young and old, were living for a few brief moments on a sun-drenched farm far, far away from the dreadful roaring of guns. Jancy didn't know this. He was simply talking about things he loved. The big clock on the wall ticked away the minutes, but no one noticed until a deep voice broke the spell. "What's going on here? Jancy, what are you doing?" It was Father's voice, and Jancy turned, the judge's picture waving again, to flutter unnoticed and forgotten to the floor. "Father," Jancy said in a choking voice, looking at him with eyes that started from a face slowly draining of color. For Father didn't look like his father now. The drab gray of the uniform he wore made him look like one small part of the endless column of marching men. "Corporal," said the officer gently, and Father saluted. "Corporal Martin Nagy of the 7th Infantry, sir," he said. The officer glanced at the clock. "You have but half an hour." Father looked down at Jancy and smiled. And here's a picture of him and Jancy. A fleeting smile before he answered, "I know, sir, we will be there on time." He raised his hand on his cap again, then took Jancy by the shoulder. "Come, son." Somehow Jancy's feet began to move, and he was walking beside his father through a blurred mass of houses, streets, and people. Then they were sitting on a bench in a quiet corner of the railroad station. Father held his arm in a tight grip and said, "Chin up, young fellow. This is the castor oil." "You knew. All day you knew," Jancy faltered, strange bits of the day's happenings suddenly falling into place. "I've known it for quite a while, son. What I didn't want was anyone crying over me. That's why I didn't tell." Jancy clenched his teeth. "I'm not crying. Men don't. And now, Jancy," Father said as the whistle of a distant train floated in, "I'm going to ask you to do something man to man. Stand up straight and look at me." "Yes, sir." "That's a good soldier. See that door, son? When I say forward march, you might march right through that door, across the street to the stable. You get the horses and you ride on home without looking back once." "Yes, sir." The train whistle sounded again, and this time much louder. "Soldier, forward, march." Father's voice seemed to come from a great distance, drowned in the clatter of many heavy boots, of the loudening clamor of the approaching train. Jancy marched blindly through the noise and the crowd, through the door and across the street, left, right, his own boots clumped on the wooden floor of the stable. Then he was on Barsany, leading Father's horse. Behind him he heard the snorting gasps of an engine, shrill whistles, and the hoarse shouts of many men, and he dug his spurs deeply into Barsany's sides. He never looked back. He never slackened the pace of the racing horses until they were pounding down the village street. "Ride on home," Father had said, but suddenly Jancy knew that he couldn't. Not yet. There was a burning ache inside him that made him shake all over. He couldn't take that home. He slipped off the horse and stumbled into the store, into the arms of the only friend who could help him now. "Uncle Moses," he gasped after a flood of tears had eased that choking ache. "I couldn't cry at home." "I know, Jancy, I know," crooned Uncle Moses, rocking him back and forth. "You are the only man there now. You'll have to be strong. But any time this business of being a man gets too much for you, you just come to Uncle Moses." Jancy lifted a tear-stained but resolute face. "I can go home now." Then he frowned, trying to remember. There was something. "Oh, Father said we need a new cow." A cow." Uncle Moses studied the ceiling. "And I need new wool and hides. Aha, I'll find a cow, and next time you come in, we'll do business." "Silver buttons," Jancy reminded him. Uncle Moses chuckled. "Something like that. Now go on home, Jancy, but remember, just come to Uncle Moses." And that's the end of chapter 6. His father has gone to war.